This is Charlotte Talks. I'm Mike Collins. We will be spending much of this hour talking about the problem faced by those in poor neighborhoods and getting access to healthy, quality foods. But first, yesterday, as a result of a court order following media requests, body cam footage was released of a police encounter with Danquaris Franklin at a West Charlotte Burger King on March 25th. After repeated requests for him to put down his weapon, CMPD fired on Franklin, who would later die from his wounds. The body cam footage shows that Mr. Franklin did in fact have a gun, but it also shows that he appeared to be lowering that weapon when Officer Wendy Curl fired her gun. WFAE's Sarah Delia is here to talk about that video and community reaction to it. Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Mike.
Put the video into context. Take us back to the very beginnings of this altercation. Why were police called to that Burger King in the first place?
So police were called to the Burger King in the first place because there were some 911 calls of people saying there was somebody inside the Burger King and that he had a gun. And from there, we still have a lot of questions about what exactly happened. We know that he moved into the parking lot, but we only have one video to go off of that CMPD has released. And
why is that? Why is there only one body cam and no dashboard cam video?
It's a great question. We asked CMPD that question, and they said that releasing this one body camera footage fulfills their the request from the court. So basically,
is that to say there is other footage?
Oh, absolutely. There's other footage, and media requests that went to the court asked for any and all footage, and CMPD said this video is good enough.
Why? Why are they allowed to say that?
That's a great question. I think that's the way that the law is written, and I think they say that this is the only relevant material. Here you go. This should answer a lot of your questions. I mean, that's up to the police.
Given the tinderbox that these situations tend to be, why would you not release everything to get it all out on the table?
That's a great question, and we hope to ask the police that question as well. When the district attorney does his investigation, usually they release a very hefty, thick report. So maybe we might be able to gain more insight into what decision the district attorney ultimately makes.
So when he was asked last week, before the video was released, Kerr Putney, the chief of police, said that when he was asked what the video showed, he said it showed a loss of life. That's a little nebulous. We've watched this video over and over and over again. It's about 2 minutes and 2 seconds long. The most important part of it is about 45 seconds into it. What does it show?
So it shows Officer Wendy Curl driving to the scene. She gets out immediately, and this is from the perspective of her body camera. And immediately you see another officer in view who appears that he was already on the scene, and they both start yelling for Danquaris Franklin to drop his gun, She walks over to the vehicle that he's squatting towards, kind of the front passenger side. It looks kind of like he's talking to someone. And you see him, his hands are kind of, one hand is out of view, one hand is pointed down. And again, there are just so many calls for him to drop his weapon.
About 15 or so.
Yeah, I think actually a few more, but multiple calls to drop his weapon. There's someone who's appears to be a woman behind him who doesn't look afraid, looks nervous. Obviously, it's a really tense situation. The police are yelling for her to get out of the way.
She's on the other side of the passenger door. He's crouched. The door is open to the car. He's crouched down at the passenger side of the car, and on the other side of the door is this woman.
Correct.
Who appears to be an employee of the Burger King.
It appears to be. We don't know for sure, but it does look like she's wearing a Burger King uniform. So there's another call for him to drop his weapon. You see a movement with his hand, and then Officer Curl fires her weapon. It sounds like she fired it twice. And it appears that you hear him say something along the lines of, you told me to, like he was trying to say, I'm doing what you told me to. That's what it sounds like. And then he quickly falls to the ground. She goes over and recovers the gun from the scene.
And you can visually see that she has recovered the gun. In reporting that I've seen on this, what the reporters say after watching the tape over and over again is that it appears that he reaches into his jacket to get this weapon, and he's holding it by the barrel with the barrel pointing at himself.
Right.
Now, things happen in a split second at these situations. Is there any question, given that reporting and what you can see from the video, that perhaps the officer acted in haste.
Well, what the video doesn't show us is what was going on before. Was CMPD, using the de-escalation training that they said that they've been investing in over the past year? What kind of commands were they giving Danquaris Franklin? I've talked to some people about that they said that the commands weren't clear enough, that maybe it should have been more like put your hands on the ground, lie face down, we'll come get the gun. So what was happening before we got to that scene? It's really unclear with just that 1-2 minute video that we have.
Because the tape that I saw picks up with the female officer saying, put down the gun. She's joined by another officer, a male officer, who says, put the gun down. And they repeat that command, I don't know, 15, 20 times in the course of before the shot is fired. I don't know how they determine what makes something legally justifiable. And Mayor Via-Lyles was asked that same question.
I look and trust that the internal investigation and the district attorney's investigation for both what we do internally as policy and as well as what we do as a community for justice, I'm going to leave that to them. The video is disturbing and difficult to watch, but it's one piece of the evidence that would be considered.
So Chief Putney has called this clear and compelling evidence that Franklin was in fact armed. I think there's no disputing that. But how do you determine what factors go into determining whether the use of deadly force was warranted?
Well, that's going to be up for the district attorney to decide. I mean, there's the internal investigation that's going on within CMPD, and then it's handed over to the district attorney, and he's really going to have to look at every piece of evidence. I'm sure he's going to be looking at lots of pieces of evidence that the public is not going to see until the report is released. But really, I mean, what it comes down to is, did this officer feel an imminent threat? Did she feel like her life was in danger? And that's going to be a really interesting and, I imagine, difficult thing to examine just based on the one video that we've seen alone.
There is a man in the car, in the passenger seat, who, after the shot is fired and the officer goes to retrieve the gun, she tells him to put his hands where she can see them, and he says that he's the manager of the store. Is that accurate?
He keeps saying, I'm the GM, so you can infer that.
Do we know why Mr. Franklin was kneeling at his passenger door of the guy was sitting in the passenger side of a car that was not occupied by a driver, and why he was there? Do we know why?
I've heard reports that he could have been praying with this man. I know that's what some people who were demonstrating last night claimed, that he was talking to this man, that he was praying. But I don't think anyone 100% knows for sure. What
has been community reaction to this? I know that the CMPD and others were primed for a lot of potential trouble that apparently has yet to materialize, and I know that Mayor Via-Lyles called for calm, and others have called for calm and to be respectful, and as a means of being respectful to Mr. Franklin's memory.
Right. Yeah, it was interesting. Before the video was even released, they had a press conference yesterday that I went to. It was city officials, including Chief Putney, saying, we understand people are going to want to demonstrate, but we don't want a repeat of what we saw in 2016. We hope that things can remain peaceful throughout the night. And I think that it's pretty fair to report that demonstrations were peaceful last night. I didn't hear any major reports of police having to get involved, and they said that they weren't going to get involved unless a crime was committed.
This is not the release of this video does not end this by any means. It is just the beginning of what happens next. And Mayor Lyles was asked, beyond this investigation into this particular instance, what does the city do to address these situations?
I think that what the chief is going to do is he's certainly already talking about a community crisis response team. We've already approved that in the budget. That's going to be implemented in our crisis intervention team. But I think he also looks at some of the data and says, who responds best to these types of incidents, and how can we train everyone to respond in the way that those folks have, those officers have, so that we can have better outcomes than what we had yesterday.
What have other members of City Council had to say about this? you know?
Well, they haven't had said much. I mean, a lot of them were present at the press conference yesterday before the video was released. And I mean, it was a very somber tone. Braxton Winston did speak out. And I think he's in a really interesting position because in 2016, he was out there. He was a protester, and it inspired him actually to run for city council and try to ensue change within the city government. And I know that he personally said that, this is a sad day for everyone, but that we really need to look at why are police feeling the need to use deadly force in these certain situations. So I think it's on the minds of everyone. And I think everyone is also very, you want to be careful with what you say in a moment like this. There's still 2 investigations going on into this shooting.
Our colleague Nick Oxner from WBTV News was responsible for getting this video released because he filed suit to have it released. And there's always a danger when these tapes come out that they don't improve our understanding of what actually occurred, or certainly what led up to it, because we don't see that on the tape, and it's not a Hollywood production. It's not multiple cameras edited carefully to show you precisely what you need to see. Has this tape muddied the situation, or has it clarified anything for anyone?
I think the one thing that it's clarified is that it appears he does have a gun. I think that was a narrative that some people said that he wasn't armed that day. But I personally have more questions as a reporter watching that video as far as the police tactics of how they were trying to de-escalate, or if they were trying to de-escalate, what kind of language were they using? How did his movement come from inside the Burger King to outside the parking lot? There appeared to be people around him that weren't scared. Why weren't they scared? So I think that there are a lot of questions that come from this video. I don't think it provides that many answers.
More to come, and we'll be continuing to cover this story on WFAE. Sarah Delia from WFAE News, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Mike.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are parts of our county that are officially classified as food deserts, places where it is nearly impossible to get access to fresh, affordable food. That's because of a dearth of grocery stores and a lack of transportation to get to one. These areas are largely on Charlotte's east and west sides and affect nearly 90,000 people, and that number is growing. From 2010 to 2015, it grew by 20%. So this is not new. It's been this way for a very long time. The questions become what's being done about it and how successful are those efforts. And for answers, we are turning for the rest of the hour to 4 individuals involved in trying to provide people in these food insecure areas with more options. Nadine Ford is board member of the North Carolina Community Garden Partners, which strives to make community gardens and the food they produce accessible to all. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
India Solomon is the mobile market coordinator for The Bulb, a mobile market system providing mostly local produce to 30 neighborhoods each month. What is The Bulb? What is the significance of the name The Bulb?
It's a bright idea.
Okay. Reggie Singleton is founder and executive director of The Mail's Place, Inc. Among their endeavors is an effort to bring comprehensive and prevention-based behavior health education, including agricultural programs, to African-American boys aged 12 to 18. Welcome back to the program.
Greetings, Mike.
Good to see you. And Kathy Metzo is here. She's the past board chair of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Food Policy Council, which is trying to build a sustainable, equitable, and healthy food system. Hi.
Hi.
Hi. We have a lot to talk about here in the next 40 minutes. We've done a number of programs on this topic, and every time we do, the number of people living in our area who are food insecure seems to grow. What does that say, Kathy, about efforts to alleviate this problem? And I have 20 seconds.
That we're not dealing with the root causes of the issue.
That's it? Then we'll come back and we'll find out about the root causes of the issue and why we're not dealing with them. I'm sorry for the shortness of this segment, but we're coming right back with more, and we'll delve deep into this in just a moment. It's Charlotte Talks on WFAE. Support for Charlotte Talks comes from WFAE members and Mazda of South Charlotte, dedicated to helping customers select vehicles that fit one's lifestyle. More at MazdaofSouthCharlotte.com. And Bank of America, presenting Women of Force in Business, a conference to empower women to unleash their full potential in the workplace. April 30th at the Charlotte Convention Center. More at ncchamber.com. 8 men have become president of the United States without having been elected. And of those 8, only half were re-elected. But it doesn't mean that their presidencies were inconsequential. In some cases, quite the contrary was true. We're going to talk to Jared Cohen. He's a founder and the president of Jigsaw. That's a technology incubator at Alphabet, the parent company of Google. And he's written a new book called Accidental Presidents. We'll talk about all of them tomorrow on this program at 9.
Why is doing taxes so hard? For many people, the gig economy is making it harder, and Congress could soon ban the IRS from offering free software to file your taxes. I'm Joshua Johnson. We'll consider ways to make taxes less taxing. Next time on 1A from WAMU and NPR.
1A coming up at 10 on listener-funded 90.7 WFAE, Charlotte's NPR news source.
It's Charlotte Talks on listener-funded 90.7 WFAE and 90.3 WFHE. I'm Mike Collins. We're going to talk for the rest of the hour about food insecurity and the need for grocery stores and access to fresh, healthy food in parts of our town that do not have it and haven't had it forever. And the problem continues to grow. Nadine Four is with us from NC Community Garden Partners. India Solomon from the Bulb. She's the mobile market coordinator there. Reggie Singleton is with the Mails Place, and Kathy Mezzo is the past board chair of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Food Policy Council. And I just asked you, Kathy, why this problem continues to be with us, and in fact continues to grow. And you said because we haven't addressed the root causes of it. What are they?
It's economic. It really comes down to creating an economy in which every person in every neighborhood in our city can thrive. And if you look at the work that we did in 2015 with State of the Plate, the map of food deserts in Charlotte looks an awful lot like the map of poverty segregation out of the Opportunity Task Force report, that crescent and wedge form. And it's tied up with everything else, right?
And is the problem growing? In other words, there are a number of organizations, several of which are seated at this table, working on this problem, or at least working to address the result, the manifestation of the problem. Can they keep pace with the growth of the problem?
That's a difficult question because I think that there are more and more organizations who are trying to tackle these issues, and more of the organizations that exist are trying to work collaboratively. But I think there is definitely a role for some different kinds of collaboration and some different ways of looking at the issue so we can actually have a productive conversation about the economic roots.
How many different organizations are working on this? All over the city, all over the county. Do we know?
I don't think we know a number.
More than 10? More than 20?
Oh, absolutely.
More
than 30 even.
Are their efforts coordinated in any way by any entity, or are they just on their own doing what they can in their areas of interest? And Nadine?
It's a mix. You have organizations that are in the forefront that are working together. For instance, I'm on the board for Friendship Trays.
Okay.
We work with Reggie. We work with State of the Plate. We work with the Bulb to address it. But you also have fringes. We have food pantries that we're just now finding exist. So how do we get food to them? We have people who are out on their own. We have gardens that are trying to do what they can. So you have pockets of people working together. But then again, it's also we don't know what we don't know. So it's a little difficult to say who is doing what.
If you're plugged in, because you're involved in all this and it's a passion of yours, if you're plugged into this and you don't know where some of these food pantries are and you don't know what some of these organizations are doing or even where they are or what they are, how do people who need their services know?
They'll know. For instance, I live in the Druid Hills neighborhood, which is considered a food insecure area,
all right.
Which by definition, there really isn't a definition for a food desert. If you look it up, it's very nebulous. However, we have resources out there that tell the people in need where to go. Okay. So we have, for instance, Druid Hills Academy has a mobile market that's supplied by Second Harvest. Those people in need know to go to Druid Hills. However, I personally am not in need, So I did not know that Druid Hill supplied food until I came onto a committee that told what was going on in the neighborhood.
So there really isn't a definition for food deserts per
No.
se, but it's generally thought to be the fact that you cannot find within your area of influence, your sphere of influence, you cannot find fresh, healthy food. There are no grocery stores that
There
serve
are no major grocery
Major
stores.
grocery stores.
But as far as a food desert, I mean, I live in what they call a food desert. The food desert is a term that outsiders use. In all my years of living in a food desert, I never knew I lived in a food desert until someone told me I lived in a food desert. I have many neighbors who would be considered poor. However, they had food.
Right.
I think it's more than just the presence of fresh food. It's a change of culture. When I was growing up, you ate fresh food. It didn't matter if you didn't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of. You still ate fresh food. As the culture changed, then fast food came into play, and it provided a cheaper alternative. During that time, generations forgot how to cook. They forgot how to prepare the food that was there. So to say that I wouldn't say there's a lack of fresh food. There's a lack of knowledge in the preparation and the eating of the product.
And we'll talk about that because we've got a guy here who teaches young men how to grow food. If you don't know how to cook it, it's of very little use to you unless you want to put it in a salad. So where did that fresh food come from? I read an article yesterday about this elderly woman, I think she was 100 and some years old, in the D.C. area who lived in the same house her entire life for 100 years. And she remembered in Washington at times when food was delivered. The milkman came. You had the street vendors come by with fresh vegetables and lettuce and fruits, and you had the meat guy come by, or they could go to the corner butcher, and that's gone now. Where did the food come from?
Well, I'm from Charlotte.
Okay.
So we had Baumgartner's downtown.
Okay.
It was within, and Charlotte was not as spread out as it was. So we had Baumgartner's, we had Jerry's Market, we had, at the time it was called Colonial on Graham Street, and we weren't so afraid to actually get out and walk or to whatever method of transportation. We didn't have to have a car to get around. Charlotte was more pedestrian friendly because it was smaller. We also had home gardens. We had more of a sense of community. So even if I didn't have, a neighbor had, and a neighbor was not afraid to share.
Right.
So that was, I was a little kid. I don't know where the food came from. I know it was there. I remember when we had a vegan restaurant here in Spirit Square.
Right.
It was really cool. We had co-ops.
I think you're sitting in it right now.
I think I am. So, but like I said, it's just the sense of community that's going down.
So there's no definition for food desert, and we've talked about what they are. But you prefer to talk about, Kathy, food insecurity, because food insecurity is about food deserts are about geography, and the problem is people, and food insecurity is about individuals, about people. And 4 years ago, and you've referenced this, in 2015, the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Food Policy Council, along with Johnson C. Smith, issued a State of the Plate report. What came out of that report, and has anything changed as a result of it in the last 4 years?
So I think we have seen the growth of some new organizations, but what I will say about food desert and food insecurity is both of those terms are terms that are defined by the USDA. And food desert, the reason why poor neighborhoods are food deserts is because poverty is part of the definition. Grocery stores and poverty. It's a geographic designator. And it's not helpful because it doesn't get us towards solutions, right? And so I think one of the results of the kinds of collaborations that we've seen and the kind of work that we've been doing with Food Policy Council is we've been trying to use the results of State of the Plate to empower some of these food pantries and food activists who are out there in communities who maybe want to be able to speak more with city council or their county representatives. So we've been doing sort of trainings on food on advocacy. And as we've been doing that, we've been creating a lot of opportunities for people who didn't know each other to maybe network and work together. And I think the collaboration with existing organizations, the sort of bringing new organizations into the fold and starting collaborations with them, that's been a really positive result out of this.
So part of the problem, India, with being food insecure, or whether you want to use the term food desert, is that people who don't know will say, well, then go and go to a neighborhood where there is a grocery store and buy fresh food and bring it home. A lot of these folks do not have transportation to get to and from their nearest Publix or Harris Teeter or wherever, and the food in some of those stores may not be affordable to them. And that's where your organization, the mobile, the bulb, I want to call it the mobile, but the bulb comes into play because you're bringing food into the neighborhood, correct?
Yes.
Where does that food come from?
Well, we get our food from a variety of sources. We rescue food from local retail grocery stores, food that aesthetically their consumers will not purchase. So it might be one bad apple in a bag. So we pick up from various locations. We sort through it to make sure our customers are getting the best quality food. We also get donations from local farms and community gardens, and we also purchase from local farms.
And what areas do you take that food to? What areas do you serve?
We do the West Boulevard Corridor and Renaissance West. We also do the North End. So we do the communities, Druid Hills, Lockwood, Genesis Park, Greenville neighborhood.
So you have, a mobile truck that just comes through? Or
We do
you
have
set
a
up
trailer.
market? What do you do?
We have a trailer, and we are also set up to work out of our cars. We take a table, we get crates of food that we've already sorted, and we set up our tables. We have flyers. We set up on the curb.
So are you selling primarily produce, or are you selling other
Fresh
things?
produce. And
Okay.
we have a no barriers concept where you take what you need and you give what you can.
So there's no set fee for anything. How do you prove?
We have suggested costs.
How do they prove to you that they either can't afford to pay more than X, or they can't afford to pay
They
anything
don't.
at
That's
all?
the no barriers.
So it's simply a trust.
Yes.
How many grocery stores participate with you on this?
We have about 3 grocery stores that participate at the moment.
See, the part of the problem that people don't understand who have access to automobiles is that if you can't use a car, you don't have a car to use, you're already working a job or 2 or 3, and it's a 45-minute trip to the grocery store by bus, maybe more, each way. That's your whole day. That's a major problem. How many people do you serve with the bulb?
Well, I don't have those exact
Okay.
numbers, but we can get anywhere from a couple dozen to several dozen.
Is that number growing
It's
over
definitely
time?
growing, especially depending on the location. We have a market that we set up at the transit center. We have a lot of customers that come through there.
So there are 90,000 people, by the latest estimates, in Charlotte who have little to no access to grocery stores. And David Livingston, who is a Wisconsin-based supermarket analyst, says there are just too many reasons not to open a store, and really no reason to open a store in a low-income area. Is he right? I mean, other retail are in these low-income areas. Family Dollar's in there. Why is it not economical and wise for a grocer to go into a low-income area? Obviously, the need for food is ever present. It's a daily thing. So why is it so difficult for grocers?
Most people say that the grocery store, the Family Dollar makes their money off of the items they sell. A grocery store won't make much money off of food. They make their money off of the non-edible items, the paper.
Value-added goods.
Yes. So, okay.
Yeah, well, blessings to the ancestors. My name is Reggie Singleton, and there's an African proverb that says that when the youth is not initiated into the village, they will burn it to the ground merely to feel its warmth. The areas that we focus on at the Mills Place is mentorship, agriculture, and social justice. We look at agriculture not only from a food security, food access perspective, but it is purely food sovereignty, which fundamentally means that the local people have a say in terms of who produces their food, where it's produced at, who benefits and profits from it. So we teach young black boys, 12 to 18, how to fundamentally solve their problems. And so food access, food insecurity, food sovereignty, diet-related diseases that African Americans disproportionately suffer from. We teach these young boys how to solve that problem. And so we've been growing since 2009, and we tackle the legacy, the history of displacement, of land rights, land justice, but also how to make sure that we work with other farmers to make sure that the food is not only adequate, but we're teaching people fundamental skills of self-sufficiency, how to do for themselves.
So you and Nadine Ford take a slightly different approach to this food problem than India Solomon at the Bulb does, because she's delivering food. You're actually growing. The two of you are teaching people to grow their own food, and you've added yet another component to it, and that is heritage and history and the contributions of African Americans to American culture and to agriculture. Which is something that I would imagine most young people don't, white or black, don't think anything about at all in an urban setting. What has been? You've done this for a while, Reggie. So what have you seen to be the lasting value of your approach?
Well, a part of why people aren't having the access to the fresh produce and why they're not growing like they have is a fallout from the industrialization of the agricultural system. So we currently have probably 90 to 95% of the people who use grocery stores, and we have to be more effective in getting people to cut into those kinds of numbers and have them grow more themselves. Teaching black boys since 2009, why it's important, and again, we link it to survival. I mean, just the very nature of growing food that you can feed to your people, to your family, the honor that comes from that, where black men are vilified, where they're, when you think of black men, you see this logo of violence and irresponsibility and everything. We bring black men and black people honor. We grow our own food, and we solve our problems, and these are the hands of young black men.
And you call this a guided journey to manhood.
Yes. Which means that the warriors is what we call the young men. The warriors are battlers. They are overcomers. They don't give up. They don't quit in all aspects of their lives. And it means that the guided part is a time-honored system of socializing black boys, and this is for thousands of years, because if you don't pro-socialize them, they'll learn antisocial behaviors elsewhere. So it is the elders who work side by side, who teach them and work with them to fundamentally solve the problems, but to guide them on this journey to manhood, because it is a process.
And it also gives them a sense of belonging to something greater than themselves, I would think. Do you start working with them as young as 12? Do they come to you voluntarily? Do you recruit them? Or do their parents push them toward you? How does it work?
In all ways. We're a cool program, so there are a lot of them who want to be a part of the program. And people see some of the high-profile activities and collaborations that we have with people like Nadine, with the parades, or with our international travel program. We're going to go to Cuba, and in June, we're going to learn a little bit more about sustainability, about public health, and we're going to do lots of service there. We're going to install a community garden while we're there in Cuba, and certainly focus on issues like broader concerns that we have with black young men around literacy. Only about 12% of 8th grade black boys read proficiently, and so we're going to tackle that head on. So we think we can walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. We can do the manhood training. We can address issues around food insecurity, but at the same time, serve our purpose.
Let me stop you there. We have to take a break. We'll come back with more and talk about more of this community gardening effort in a moment. Charlotte Talks on WFAE. Support for Charlotte Talks comes from WFAE members and the Regional Stormwater Partnership of the Carolinas. Reporting pollution in creeks, rivers, and lakes will help keep them clean and healthy. RegionalStormwater.org. And Greater Charlotte Oral Surgery, hosting the annual Academic Advantage in Fort Mill on May 4th with 9 healthcare professionals providing career advice for middle and high schoolers. Details at ioralsurgery.com. Coming up in 20 minutes, yesterday was tax day. Tax policy is one of the main ways in which Americans directly interact with President Donald Trump's policies, because one of his signature pieces of legislation was the tax bill in 2017. A look at tax troubles and tax triumphs on 1A with Joshua Johnson and his guests in 20 minutes at 10 o'clock. And we're coming right back.
Former Nightline host Ted Koppel is the special guest at WFAE's annual dinner on Thursday, June 6th at the Charlotte Convention Center. He'll talk with WFAE CEO Joe O'Connor about the state of journalism and the health of our nation's democracy. Find out about tickets and sponsorship opportunities at WFAE.org. An Evening with Ted Koppel is sponsored by SunTrust, with additional support from Greer Walker.
It's Charlotte Talks on WFAE and WFHE. I'm Mike Collins. We're talking about food insecurity and the need for greater access to healthy food, and people who are making that happen in various different ways, from helping people to grow it, like Nadine Ford with the North Carolina Community Garden Partners, and Reggie Singleton, who not only helps people grow it, but he is mentoring young men into what he calls a guided journey into manhood. It's so much more than just growing food, but that's a major component of it. Reggie Singleton. India Solomon is here with The Bulb. It's a mobile farmers market, and she's the coordinator of that. And Kathy Mezzo is the board chair, or past board chair, of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Food Policy Council. In 2015, Mecklenburg County Public Health adopted a model called the Healthy Corner Store Initiative. It involved 200 corner stores in 6 zip codes. Are those efforts continuing, Kathy?
They are, and Reggie may be able to speak to this as well, but some of the work on that came directly out of the State of the Plate.
Has it made
report.
a difference? And do people, if you go to a corner store or a gas station and you walk into the part of the gas station where they're selling, Snicker bars and Cokes and stuff like that, do people expect to see fresh food? Will they buy it? Do they know what to do with it?
Well, and again, these bodegas, gas stations, corner stores, where people have very little options. So they're using these facilities to purchase food. So what we've tried to do is to create a relationship with the owners, with those partners, and to educate them a little bit on how you could have a duality. You could make money and take care of your family, but at the same time be very concerned about the needs and interests, the health needs and interests of the community. And I don't think it has to be either or. We've been successful in terms of working with many of those store owners, and we continue to look forward to having a...
Does some of your produce, either of your garden produce, does it end up in these stores?
Yes. In fact, there is this one store that I've been working with over on Takasiji, which is a food priority area, and this is not only where healthy quality food is unavailable, but there's also, and this is a part of the pernicious part of when we talk about desert, because it's not just the absence of food, but it's the absence of capital, it's the absence of education, the absence of good education, and many times exploitation. So there's a lot that goes into that, and when we just reduce it to food and not look at the origins or the systemic purposes that Kathy talked about, then I don't think we provide the full service that it needs. But certainly those stores, when you're able to work with them effectively, we've had some good success in terms of getting them to provide healthier choices and options and more. Like, for instance, if you're talking about, let's say, a store that has lots of sugary beverages, we may go in and say, this water here is one of your products. Why not put more water over here and put it at eye levels where people can see it? Why not put chopped up, cut up, healthier fruits and available? And we've seen some success with that.
Okay. Nadine Ford, you help people grow food in various different areas. How many different areas are you in with these community gardens?
Right now we have two. We have the Little Sugar Creek Community Garden, which is located not too far from here, and the Druid Hills Community Garden. We're starting work with Martin Luther King Middle School on their garden, but so our gardens don't work with the individual. We actually do a collaborative effort. So we will bring volunteers in. Both gardens are more family or communal in nature. So we bring in volunteers to work the plots. Then we harvest as a family and we will distribute the food. We may give the food to, we try to give 10% to Friendship Trades, the local Meals on Wheels program. Mm-hmm. But we also give, if you're walking down the Greenway and you see we're in there and you come by and you say, hey, can I get a tomato? We don't ask any questions. And because we say once you walk through those gates, you're equal to everyone else. So you come in, you want a tomato, we'll give you a tomato. We will also talk to you about why this tomato is special. How do you connect with your neighbors? How do you connect back to the soil? So it's not just a community garden where people come grow food, take it home, be happy. We actually work with my key volunteers. We have reading assignments. One of the books they're required to read is by Dr. Monica White. It's The Freedom Farmers.
The volunteers are required to read
Yes,
this?
because education is everything. I require people to look at the history of Charlotte. At what point did the segregation fall? When did we look at how the planned segregation of Charlotte, the planned ghettos of Charlotte, and I'm not just talking about the obvious ones, but even during the Industrial Revolution, when the people who lived in Plaza Midwood were considered lower than those of Myers Park. Mm-hmm. So when did this separation happen, and what can we do to almost reverse it or close to reverse it so that all these issues go away? Like Kathy said, it's a root cause. It's not just about putting food in the neighborhood, because Lord knows if that was the case, it would be solved. But it's more to it. It's looking at redlining. It's looking at just planned, like I said, keep saying planned segregation. We're looking at history that keeps repeating itself because no one wants to address it. No one wants to say, hey, look, let's stop for a second. Let's look to see why affordable housing is such an issue when we have buildings that we're tearing down. Why can't we go in and renovate? I mean, there's reasons, I'm sure, but let's start talking about the untalkables. Let's look at this displacement. Instead of saying it is gentrification, let's call it what it is, which is displacement. When you have a neighborhood where a group of people can no longer afford to live there, so they move on to another neighborhood and they push those current residents out. Why does this keep happening, and what can we do to stop that and reverse it?
Ever since the study about upward mobility came out, we've been very concerned about that in the city. At least lip service has been paid to that, and we've been very concerned about affordable housing. And Mayor Lyles, along with most elected leaders, she has said that the city doesn't do grocery stores. Mm-hmm. The city builds sustainable neighborhoods that grocers should be attracted to. Is that working?
I don't have a grocery store in my neighborhood, but I have 2 breweries.
So,
yeah. So
which means gentrification is.
Yeah.
That means displacement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if no grocers are being attracted, what does that say about the city's efforts?
Well,
and can the city really do that? Can they really? You can't force a grocery store into a neighborhood.
No, but you can create incentives, right? We incentivize businesses all the time to move here, to create jobs.
And we don't do this for
We're
grocery
not
stores?
incentivized. We're
like
not
Dole.
incentive. Yeah.
Dole bananas.
Yeah.
So what kind of incentives do you think might work?
Well, so I've got a ton of ideas, and I'm sure everybody at the table has ideas. But I think one of it is asking different questions, having these difficult conversations. We have to think about public-private partnerships in a different way. Why are we not incentivizing small businesses that emerge from the ground up in neighborhoods that have been neglected, purposefully neglected by city and county officials, right? Why are we not investing in those small businesses? The city and the county could have a grant program that pairs with loans from, we've got 2 of the largest banks, right? One is headquartered here. The other is the largest employer. This is the hub that's the largest employer for that largest bank. We are about to get a second headquarters of a major national bank here. There are solutions out there, but your community activists aren't necessarily the ones who are going to be able to to create those kinds of solutions.
And it's also, what do they consider a grocery store? If I decide that I want to create a co-op because I don't have Public attached to my name or Harris Teeter, does that negate me in some kind of way? Like I said, we have a Jerry's in my neighborhood. It's a little store. It's been there forever and a year. We've got Wayne's, which is a little independent store. But even though those are within the mile of the so-called food desert rule, they're not considered because they're not a major grocery store. So it's what kind of name is the city trying to build for itself? Is it a brand name? Do we want to be Sparkles, or do we want to really be real and say, hey, look, you're not a Publix, but you're an independent grocer. We can work with you to get staples in your store along with fresh food so that you can feed this community.
So why can't the city offer tax incentives? You put a grocery store here, you don't pay taxes on this property until you make a profit.
Well, I mistakenly said Dole, but I meant Chiquita Banana, which is a great example of how the city just bankrolled that company and
about 20 minutes.
Absolutely.
Until
all
they
of
left.
20 minutes. All of 20 minutes or so. And so it's a matter of the leadership, both elected, the corporate, the government, finding the courage to to be responsive to the needs of all people. And they're choosing to, when you look at where some of the stores are facing one another, like in Cotswold,
Mm-hmm.
it makes absolutely no sense to have those two large giants, fighting it out like that when there are other places in the community that needs it. So it's a matter of the elected officials, the city officials, county, finding the courage to, again, meet the needs of all of the people. I think there is an insidious aspect of when we look at, well, what are some of the issues and some of the social factors. One of the things that we must not allow to escape us is the role that racism and white supremacy plays. It is rooted in many of the organizations that serves foods, that it is in the government, it is in the nonprofits, it is in the funders, and many of them are rotten to the core and are not interested at all in addressing the needs of the people. It's rooted in entitlement. And so
let's go back.
Equity then has to be...
Stop. Let's go back. Nonprofits. Name names.
Names on the nonprofits?
Yep.
In the sense
of them not really contributing to the solution.
Well,
to the problem.
look at their, in terms of having equitable solution, in terms of look at their boards. Do they have a black, particularly a conscious black presence? Do they have the black executive directors that are conscious and not just face? So, do the funders
help me understand?
Okay, so for instance, with Friendship Trays, I will speak on behalf of Friendship Trays. Lucy Bush Carter is our executive director. I am the past board president, and one thing that we have done is to look to see how do we aggressively diversify our board to make sure that we have individuals on there that can speak to the issues. So we go out and we seek the voices, and that's one of the things that's missing from all of this is that we don't seek the voices of the people that are affected. We want to keep telling them what to do, what they need, but we don't want to listen to what they have to say. So until all of our powers come together and say, hey, look, what do you need? What do you want? As I've said before, it's along the same line as when women earned the right to vote. Had a white man told women, look, this is how you're going to vote, that whole thing probably would have fell apart. During the civil rights movement, had a white man come and said, hey, look, black people, this is what you're going to do. I wouldn't be sitting here. I'd probably be in somebody's field still right now. So we have to learn to quiet our voices and listen to the other voices.
So we have three people around this table who are African American, and they, India, you've been quiet for a long time, so I want to bring you into this. If we listen, because you're on the front lines of this. If we listen to the people you serve, what would they be telling us?
I think they would be telling us it's so much more than food. Food insecurity, you have families out there working 3 jobs. You have families that want to be heard. There are other things going on in their neighborhoods. like the gentrification or the redistribution of their this is what they're scared of. They're not thinking about, oh, I need to go to the grocery store. They're thinking about, are my taxes going to be too high for me to afford to even stay in this neighborhood? Is my neighborhood safe enough for my kids to play outside? Am I able to even, some of them can't even get out the door to get the food, so we deliver the food to them. Some of them have disabilities. They have other obligations that fill their lives. So how can we make this easier for them?
And I want to get back to you, Reggie, because I think you raised an interesting point that nobody talks about. And a lot of people give to some nonprofits with their whole heart because they sincerely want to have an impact on whatever the problem is that nonprofit is trying to solve. And what you're telling me, or what you're alleging here, is that some of these nonprofits are paying lip service to the problem, and they have people who don't really understand the problem. You used the word conscious when you were talking about black people on these boards, conscious black people who are what? That means part of the community, who really, truly are in the trenches.
These are people that are truly awoke and have some historical understanding of the conditions, how they've been created, as well as having some solution in terms of addressing it from a systemic standpoint. Because we could look at individual success.
So I have 1 minute left.
Okay.
How do we, people of good conscience,
absolutely, and well intended.
Yes. How do we find those groups, those organizations? How do we know where to put our trust, our money, our efforts?
Well, I think that when the Mail's Place is one great example. We've demonstrated this over a time-honored. We got a proven track record of teaching black boys, of mentoring black boys, and when you find good organizations that have proven to be self-sufficient, I think it's important that you support them and not just continue to pour money. Again, even though they're well-intended, you can't just continue to pour money into a black hole and pray for success.
So Reggie Singleton is the founder, executive director of the Mail's Place, another organization here, Nadine Ford's North Carolina Community Garden Partners, and India Solomon's The Bulb. She's the mobile market coordinator there. Kathy Mezzo joined us too, the past board chair of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Food Policy Council. Thanks all for the hour.